All right, so I've got Tommy here with me. Tommy, let's talk about some other outstanding veteran minimum to taxpayer MLE free agents who have been swirling around in our individual minds, and maybe these will be more out of the box dark horse free agents that haven't been too oft talked about by Lakers Nation. But I love to Moneyball, you love to Moneyball, so let us Moneyball with $3 to $5 million or so. Before I list out some of the names that I want to bring to your attention, do you have any free agents in your mind that we haven't yet covered, or someone who hasn't been too widely talked about that you'd be interested in pursuing if they were willing to take the veteran minimum, or even, let's say, the taxpayer MLE at 5.6 million or the BAE of 5.1 million if we're able to open that up?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the names we've sort of touched on. For some reason in my head, I know we've talked about this name 100 times, but now I can't remember if we've actually talked about it with respect to this year's free agency. But like, somebody like a Gary Trent Jr. Yeah, I guess my point is like BAE, smaller MLE, VetMin. I feel to get like an impact player, it's probably going to be a guard. I feel like the big men market is become so saturated that it's going to be hard to get somebody at that price for that we haven't already, other than the names we've already discussed. I know for sure. DeAnthony Melton, definitely. I think he's coming off his ACL, which is not a death sentence, as we all know anymore. He missed the whole season, so he should be fully recovered by training camp. He's elite defender and elite point of attack defender. He could be a starting guard as he proved for the Warriors beginning of the season. And frankly, if you look at their record and their sort of defensive metrics, their season started to fall off the rails the second DeAnthony Melton got hurt.
Mhm.
And then it's like, they were sub 500. It went from like their pretty strong start and very strong preseason, as we all remember, to below 500 until they got Jimmy Butler, and then they had their like crazy run, obviously. But DeAnthony Melton, I absolutely would take, and I would consider if it came down to it, I'd almost want to like promise him a starting spot because he seems like the ideal complement to Luca in the backcourt.
So I pretty much agree with you. Do you think the front office will be reticent or hesitant to sign someone like him, considering how we've been burned by injuries in the past with like guys like Gabe Vincent? Although if he's only taking the veteran minimum, I think it's worth it because this dude has shot like his volume 3 point shooting wise has stayed consistent at two threes per game the last 3 years. He shot like 39% in 2022 23, 36%, but still hit two a game. Um,
Yeah.
on top of it, he's a pretty good playmaker, like averaging around 2.5 to 3 assists a game. And obviously, you guys know about his defense. He's had like 2 seasons worth of like 1.6 steals per game back to back. And I don't know, I kind of consider him like, almost like a prime Avery Bradley, or how Avery Bradley played with us that championship season before he was unable to continue his tenure in the bubble. And so that's how I would kind of consider DeAnthony Melton. But do you think the front office would actually maybe take that chance?
So two factors, or I guess, yeah, well, two factors. One is, does he take the veteran minimum? Two, how close are we going to end up to the, I guess first and or second apron, depending on how the rest of our moves go. If we are signing him for the veteran minimum and we have the wiggle room to waive him, or, I guess if he's a veteran minimum, you could always use a second round pick to try to dump him if he gets injured again. That would be flexibility I would want. But otherwise, yeah, for a veteran minimum, it seems like pretty low risk. And like I said, I think people would probably characterize this as an overreaction, but I honestly do think that guy could start on this team. And he would be like the
Yeah.
best, again, subject to how he comes back from the ACL, which again is not as much of a death sentence as it was when we were growing up. D'Anthony Melton is like a starting caliber NBA player, in my opinion, on a contending type of team.
Yeah, I agree with you. Okay, so in contrast to DeAnthony Melton, what about a healthy guard in the same vein? He's a little bit longer. He was once Luka Doncic's teammate as recently as last year, and I want to talk about the Australian Kobe Bryant. Tommy, he was called the Australian Kobe
Oh,
Bryant coming out of the draft by Fran Fraschilla, I believe. But let's talk about Dante Exum, 29 years old, 6'5" with a 6'9" wingspan. He shot 40% from three the last 2 seasons with the Mavericks since reinstating his NBA career from overseas. Granted, it's at a low volume, but he has proven that he can hit that catch and shoot outside shot catch and shoot outside shot. And on top of it, I just love that he's lanky, he's long, he's a good defender. He can also play make and handle the ball for you in a pinch. Former Rob Pelinka client, and as I mentioned, Luka Doncic's teammate. They seem to have good rapport with one another, and he seems like kind of like the perfect complement to Luka in the backcourt. So, what are your thoughts on Dante Exum? And then after you give your thoughts, would you, let's say they're both willing to take the veteran minimum, would you take DeAnthony Melton or Dante Exum?
All things, salary wise being equal, I would probably take Melton more because of his slightly better consistency as a perimeter shooter. Exum has had some flashes where he's done it okay, but
Specifically against us.
specifically against us, and Rob might have been paying attention. But like Exum would be a really nice, like, I don't know that he could be a starting player on a contender, but if you drop Gabe Vincent and you want a big guard off the bench who could do some playmaking and creating, Exum would be great.
Yeah, Dante Exum would almost remind me of, when we had Troy Brown Jr.
Yeah,
Maybe a little bit more consistent and solid than Troy Brown Jr., though. And also, I just trust Dante's defense more consistently as well. So, yeah, I would love Dante Exum. I think for me, I kind of value just the youth and upside a little bit more, even though I think they might be the same age. I guess I value more of the having seen it more most recently and Dante Exum being healthy and having a little bit more juice, I believe. But I wouldn't mind either one. Lastly, before we take it to break, this is a weird one, okay? I'll just go out ahead and say that. It's especially weird because it's at a position that the Lakers are kind of heavy in currently. But what do you think about power forward slash small ball center Gershon Yabusele. He dunked over LeBron James in the Olympics last year, if anybody remembers. He came back to the NBA this year on a veteran minimum contract with the Philadelphia 76ers and had a really, really solid year. 11 points, 5.6 rebounds, 2 assists on 50% from the field, 38% from three. 6'8", 265 pounds. This dude is a big boy, Tommy. 7'1" wingspan. He has such weird proportions because he's so big, but he's weirdly mobile and can do some things on the perimeter. Your thoughts on Gershon Yabusele, even though the fit seems kind of weird and you're not sure where to slot him in, but he is talent.
he's talent. And so this is like, the hard ones that we always like. We talk about guys like this every off season. And so from a pure talent perspective, if you can get a guy like that for a minimum contract or, small or BAE or small MLE, something like that, that feels like you're getting away with something. But as I like to remind my wife when she's shopping on sales for things we don't need, just because you can afford something and you're getting a good value out of it doesn't mean you necessarily need to get it. And so I almost feel like Yabusele is sort of in that bucket. Like he is undoubtedly a good player and could help a team. I just don't know where, like on a team that already has LeBron, who's sort of like, and Rui, and look again, like a lot of maybe trades happen that change all of this. Like, is it so obvious that a 6'8" center, would get minutes on this team? I don't know. I think the weakness we have is true size as opposed to strength. Like we do need strength too, don't get me wrong, but pure size. And so like, do we want to commit that money to a guy that doesn't address that issue? I'm not sure. But yes, value wise, it would be a nice value.
Yeah, I think like let's say Rui Hachimura gets traded for a center, right? Then you would be more probably
Yeah,
open to this sort of scenario. And I think with
more
Gershon too,
open. Yeah.
the Sixers tried to play him at small ball center, but his rim protection sucks. Like he's best suited at the power forward position where he can kind of use his mobility against other players. And sometimes he has shown flashes of moving his feet on the perimeter and using his like big, strong, sturdy body to body up offensive players. And then obviously on the offensive end, he can also bully ball his way to the basket and has surprising like handles, shooting, etc. It's almost like having like Nas Reed, but in Draymond Green's body, kind of. If that makes any
It's
sense.
like almost
Uh,
like reminds me of like a Montrezl Harrell type of
yeah,
impact.
who can shoot from the outside, which is
Who could
pretty
shoot it more from the
valuable.
outside? Yeah.
So yeah, he would be an interesting play. I'm just not sure where he currently fits right now. But if ancillary moves on the outside happen that open up spots at the four, because I mean, like I think a bench forward, a forward off the bench who can score, I think would be helpful for this team, especially if he's only making taxpayer MLE veteran minimum money. All right, let's take it to break here, and then let's come back and talk about some other names after the turn. All right, so we are back. Tommy, let's talk about a big man again. And let's talk about him with regards to the taxpayer MLE. And I want to bring up a popular name that has made the rounds on this podcast for the last 2 or 3 years as the Lakers have tried to find Anthony Davis a center. And let's talk about his one of his alma maters. That doesn't make sense. Let's talk about a play. Let's talk about a player who was an alma mater at his previous school. Okay, I'm gonna
I think
stop. They both
you're looking for alumni.
who was an alumni at the same school that Anthony Davis went to,
And the
University of
same alma
Kentucky.
mater. That's
The
right.
same alma mater. I don't know English. Let's talk about center Nick Richards because he's on a
Ah,
non-guaranteed deal for the Phoenix Suns, and they have until June 29th to guarantee his deal. The Phoenix Suns could go an entirely different direction after they trade Kevin Durant. It doesn't seem like he's going to be on the team next season. So assuming that they don't guarantee Nick Richards or Nick Richards' agent says, hey, we want another opportunity elsewhere and we want to sign a new long-term deal. Can you let us off this deal? And so in that scenario, he would be an unrestricted free agent. So what are your thoughts on signing Nick Richards to the MLE? 27 years old, great athletic, explosive lob threat for Luka. With the Suns, he averaged 9.5 points, 8.6 rebounds, 0.8 blocks, 60% from the field, can also knock down a mid-range jump shot. Your thoughts on Nick Richards?
yeah. So assuming right that Kevin Durant does get traded, which I think is an if in my mind still, because Kevin Durant, like he's gonna want to have some say, and I know he's under contract, but look, he a team is not going to pony up for him unless they know he's going to be mentally committed at his age to play for them. So if it's possible something doesn't work out with the right team, they're not just going to dump him for nothing or scraps. So, but if they do dump him and Nick Richards becomes available, the one thing I sort of kick myself over is the Suns were so bad to watch. I never really got like a good read on Nick Richards. Like we looked into him when he was sort of thrown out there as like a Lakers potential target, but once he went to a team that was better than the Hornets, or better than, a team that was like slightly more competitive than what he used to be on. I sort of lost track. I know he had some really good games for them. I think in my head, if I'm remembering the same guy that we wanted to trade for midseason, I would go after that guy,
Mhm.
definitely. And I think there's a few ways to do it, including even if they take the option on him, or excuse me, not the option, but they guarantee his contract, like figuring out a trade or some sort of guarantee and extension. If we're trading a player who has real value like Rui and not just an expiring contract, something like that. Um, but yes, based on what I remember, I think I would take him. I didn't follow him close enough after he got to Phoenix, to be honest.
Well, I'll fill in the gaps for you. 9 points, nearly 9 rebounds. You know he can rebound the ball, unlike Jackson Hayes. You know he's more stable and more aware than Jackson Hayes, but he also has Jackson Hayes's explosive rollability. So for me, I would love Nick Richards at the taxpayer MLE. So, okay, moving on really quickly. We'll round this out. This is a weird one as well. It's kind of like a talent play, like Gershon Yabusele. I don't know why I like saying Yabusele instead of Yabusele. But what are your thoughts on 7'3",
Whoa,
7'8" wingspan player, Bol
whoa.
Bol? So Bol Bol is 25 years old. He also played with the Phoenix Suns last year, like kind of more at the start of the season, and then he got phased out. But in 10 starts for the Phoenix Suns, he averaged 12 points, 5.7 rebounds, 1.3 blocks on 50% from the field, 34% from three. This one's a weird one, but yeah, your thoughts on Bol Bol and whether the Lakers would even take a flyer like this. Only 25 years old.
Bol Bol is Shaquille O'Neal's favorite player, as we all know. So if Shaq has been in touch with Genie Bus recently, he might be on our radar. I think the thing about Bol Bol that, you know, keeps me away, I guess, is it's sort of like the Mo Bamba thing. Like on
Yeah.
paper, this guy should clearly be good, and he's had multiple stops and multiple opportunities, and it seems like he's been given a chance. It's not like, oh, he goes to each team he goes to, he play they don't play him at all. Like it feels like he's had a couple of chances. And I know injuries happen and circumstances on teams change and roles change, but it for somebody with measurements like that, it feels like if he was at all remotely effective, he would have stuck somewhere. And so the fact that he hasn't sort of reminds me of like the Mo Bamba problem. And you start to wonder like why is he still floating? And so like, if you're thinking about like a third center, like we have Christian Coloco, we've already been developing for a year. Like
Hmm.
I'd almost be more inclined to just keep him than take a run at Bol Bol.
That's fair. And to be fair to Bol Bol, like I said, he started 10 games for the Suns and averaged 12.6 rebounds, 1.3 blocks, which is pretty good, right? But then you wonder, well, then why did he get phased out eventually? And I think for someone like Bol Bol, if we were going after his sort of like tweener, lanky archetype, I'd almost rather just sign Chris Boucher, right? Who's a
Yeah.
veteran and has experience and knows how to play off the bench or start in a pinch. Um, what about Ben Simmons, Tommy?
Ooh, Ben Simmons is a tough one. I mean, yeah, if he's taking the caliber of contract that we're talking about, and this is like unfortunate because Ben Simmons would actually be like the perfect Jared Vanderbilt replacement if we were
Yeah.
able to dump Jared Vanderbilt somewhere because they're equally inept offensively. I would argue that Vanderbilt's a little more inept
Well, not if
even.
you're taking into account actual point guard skills and playmaking, though. Like
Yes,
that's
yes, that
where,
is true. That is true. Sorry, I was focused on scoring and or reluctance to score. I think they're Vanderbilt and Ben Simmons are almost like the same caliber on that front. Ben Simmons does play make quite a bit better. Both really good defenders. Although I will say, I think Ben Simmons is a lot more versatile defensively than
he
Vanderbilt. I mean, he's like
he can play center,
he can play
or he does
center,
play center.
but he's like Vando, like the thing people forget, Vando's ideal matchup is like Paul George. You know what I mean? Like an elite wing who can ball handle, but plays mostly on the perimeter. That's where Vando thrives. Vando's not like a, point guard, point of attack defender, whereas I feel like Ben Simmons can really hold his own as a point of attack defender when he gets switched out there. So I really, really, of course, nobody wanted to touch him with a 10-foot pole when he had like a $44 million contract or whatever. But veteran minimum, like he was with the Clippers at the this season, BAE, smaller MLE, that type of money. If you have the room to play him off the bench, you could do a lot worse than Ben Simmons. You have to live with the memes for a year, but I think it's worth it.
Yeah, I agree with you. You pretty much I just watched your progression of talking yourself into it as you kept
Yeah.
speaking, which is kind of funny. Okay, lastly, I'll give you three names. You can touch upon whoever you want to touch upon. Amir Coffey from the Clippers, 27 years old, 6'8" with a 6'8" wingspan as well. Shot 47% from the field, 41% from three with the Clippers this season. Jake LaRavia, who the Kings traded for, but he's going to become an unrestricted free agent, or he might get a qualifying offer. 6'7", 23 years old, career 37% shooter. I think he was born in Pasadena. Shout out Pasadena. And Luke Cornett, 29 years old, will be an unrestricted free agent. I don't think the Celtics will be able to re-sign him considering their books and them trying to stay under the second apron. Do you like any what? Which player do you like the most out of that group, and who do you want to touch on?
I like all three. I want to touch on Luke Cornett. He is the one I would take out of this group. Part of it is we need a center, and we're going to talk about that all
Sure.
summer until we get a center. But I just think Luke Cornett is a little underrated, and that feels weird to say. Like he won a championship, he had a really solid season for the defending champs this year. He's just like positionally as a rim. First of all, as a rim protector, he's better than you would think. um I feel like he falls into the like category, and I do this, like, I mean, a lot of people do this, but you see him, he kind of just looks like a big doofy white guy, and you just assumes things about him, and then like you watch him play.
He looks like cousin Greg from Succession. If anybody's watched Succession or if they haven't, but
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. So, like, he doesn't look like he's going to take a hit and explode off the ground for a block, but he does it way more than you would think. I mean, he had a couple of like 4+ block games in their playoff run this year. And he's just a solid defensive player who is not completely inept when you throw him the ball in the short roll, or, decent hands around the rim, decent soft finishing ability around the rim. Like, again, you're not signing this guy to be like a double digit scorer, but he does everything so well on both ends. And if you can get him for a reasonable price, it's like absolutely a no brainer. And I do think he will be moving. I don't know where, but obviously the Celtics, with their cap situation and the fact that they're sort of punting next season because of Tatum's injury, like, we should have somebody will have an opportunity to swipe Cornette.
Yeah, he's definitely not a sexy name, but after watching him in the playoffs, I was like, oh, he's actually pretty mobile for a center. He like
Yeah,
knows how to contest out to 3-point shots, knows how to move his hips a little bit. It's weird. He's kind of like a more mobile, like the prime version of Jay Huff, if that makes any sense to people.
yeah.
And he actually used to shoot more threes at the beginning of his career when he was with the Knicks. I would assume that if he was on the Lakers, JJ Redick would make him shoot threes once again because I don't think he's a bad shooter. But yeah, I would be fine with Luke Cornett for like the taxpayer MLE. Amir Coffey is interesting, but I just know from Clippers fans that he's been a mixed bag. Like sometimes he'll stick pretty competently on wings like KD and contest well. Other times he'll get blown by consistently. So Amir Coffey's kind of a mixed bag, but you do like his good measurables at 6'8" with a 6'8" wingspan and the fact that he shot 40% from three. Jake LaRavia is interesting as well because he kind of reminds me of like I don't know. He's kind of like Dalton Connect, right? Like a slightly taller version of Connect who can get hot. He's kind of athletic. He's got some sauce to him for a white boy. So
He
all
plays some
interesting names.
defense too.
He plays some defense too and comes from like the Memphis Grizzlies, that kind of culture. So yeah, interesting names to think about. With that said, that'll do it for this like random outstanding veteran minimum taxpayer MLE free agents segment/episode. And yeah, Tommy, I'll see you later.
Peace.
Later.